Okay, we do have action coming out of executive session. BOE 70. The board approves and authorizes the president to sign and issue a letter setting forth the BOE's response to CSEA grievance 141501 and 141502 as presented to a subcommittee of the board on March 25th, 2015. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Okay, and now I would like to entertain a motion to suspend the agenda and give Dr. Pedalino an opportunity to make a statement prior to public participation.
So moved.
Second.
Okay? Any discussion about that? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Okay. Motion carries. Dr. Pedalino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that we have agreed to pretty much have a single agenda item tonight. We want to talk about the school district budget, but I did want to take a few minutes and have a discussion, we'll make a statement, and I will take questions from the board members if they would like about the Kingston High School project. To start, I don't mean to minimize the magnitude of the Kingston High School project or the changes that have recently emerged. We've dealt with changes to issues in other projects before, the Carnegie project, our Excel buildings, our $20 million in renovations. Over the last few years, we've dealt with them. We've dealt with them swiftly, successfully, and without public concern. I understand that there's naturally a great deal of interest in the Second Century project, and I think it's appropriate to just have a discussion with the board at this time. A recent headline, which drew a lot of attention, stated the district did not meet with the state education department prior to the vote. Firstly, I'd like to point out that there is no state ed regulation, there is no state education law that the district has to meet with the state education department prior to the vote. The district did not violate any law or requirement. As I mentioned before with the other projects, we've had several projects over the last few years, and none of them were preceded by a meeting with the state education department. Carnegie, no meeting. Excel project, no meeting. $20 million of work in the middle schools and our elementary schools, no meetings with state education department. Each of these projects was completed and aid was awarded. Pre-referendum meetings have not been part of our procedure here at the Kingston City School District. Also, there is a belief that the district architects, construction management, and administration did not do our due diligence regarding the maximum cost allowance, which is really the crux of this topic. I have here SA 130s, which are state aid documents for projects that were ongoing during the time of the Second Century pre-referendum, as well as just past that referendum, where the Kingston High School maximum cost allowance is calculated at $210 million, well below the $137.5 million that we proposed. Moreover, I have an SA 130 from our summer roofing project in KHS dated January 15th, 2015, that shows the maximum cost allowance at Kingston, Maine alone. Kingston, Maine alone, not one of the other five, but that's only one out of 6 buildings, at $70 million, which is actually a small increase from the last time we had an SA 130, which is, again, a state aid document that tells us what our MCA is. The MCA, the maximum cost allowance for our buildings at Kingston High School campus, have remained steady, predictable, and constant throughout for all of our ongoing and our past projects. There were also accusations made in the local media and even statements made by members of this board that there was pre-knowledge and secrecy around the maximum cost allowance calculations. I have confirmed with State Education Department, with the Facilities Planning Department, that the final MCA was not provided to KSQ or the Kingston City School District formally until March 13th, 2015. An informal note was sent to KSQ in February. KSQ alerted the steering committee in February. They presented the adjustments to the plan to the committee, and we scheduled a presentation for the Board of Education as a whole on the March meeting. To further my argument against these accusations of secrecy, I'd like to point out that the minutes of the steering committee are posted on our KHS project website. The dates of these meetings are attached to those minutes, And the meetings are as open as any of our board committee meetings, our policy committee, audit and finance, teaching and learning, etc. State Ed Planning has stated to me that each project is different, and it's their job to establish the maximum cost allowance and aidability of a given project. And that's true. We have and we continue to work with State Ed Planning cooperatively through this process. The misinterpretations and the mistakes have been cleared up. We're on the same page. Kingston High School Second Century Project is now redrawn to meet the parameters set by the Facilities Planning Committee at State Department and State Education Department, and we are ready to deliver the project at or below cost that was presented to the voters on December 10th. Last few days I've been called to talk to a lot of people, and I've been told that this project is cursed. Past attempts to renovate Kingston High School were sidetracked by studies for white-nosed bats, for floodplains, and I would like to say that this project isn't cursed, but it's not blessed either. As I've said from the beginning, there will be bumps. This is a project to renovate a building that at its heart is 100 years old, and there's been more than 30 years before any structural improvements have been done to that building. The new developments certainly are not just a bump. I don't want to minimize that. It's a change in the length of our path, but our path is still the same. And our destination is still an outcome the outcome that we wanted for our students and for our community. Our job here is to navigate our path, navigate through the bumps, fill the potholes, and keep the focus on the end game, which is a 21st century Kingston High School for our students at the price tag that was approved by our voters. I would like to recommend that the Board of Education that there be an addition to the Board of Education, that there be an addition to our steering committee. We have 2 standing members on there, that there be an addition of 2 more members of the Board of Education at the board's will to maybe rotate those people through. I would also like to recommend the board consider allowing KSQ and BBL to provide monthly or every meeting detailed updates to the Board of Education on the whole project in a public meeting. And hopefully this will provide all the members as well as the community with the information that people feel they did not and do not have. We want to make sure that we're here letting you know everything, even outside of the steering committee and the facilities committee. And I'm willing to answer some questions if there are any.
Any questions? That's your thoughts.
One thing that was that maybe I'm still confused about, at the meeting that we had our last meeting, KSV talked about regulations that were put forth in August that then weren't clarified until, and it was about the multi-year cost allowance, correct? That then weren't clarified until after the vote, and that was one of the reasons why there had to be this change.
That, when you take the maximum cost allowance that we had, $210 million, right, that legislation had no impact. The real conversation here is about the maximum cost allowance. When we found that, when we're looking at where we are now with a much smaller maximum cost allowance, that's when that 5-year rollover was an issue, because it's the total money that we can invest in one building during any given time. When you look at that big picture of being well below the maximum, we had much more money to spend per building within that small time period.
Okay.
So that law would not have, that regulation, we wouldn't even be talking about it if we weren't given that new MCA.
Oh, I see. Because my thought was that we should be grandfathered into something like that if there was, and that our lawyers should pursue that. But what you're saying is that because the MCA is different from what we had planned.
Correct.
And also what I'm understanding you to say right now is that the MCA that we had gone forward with was our estimate, our best guess estimate based on past history over years and years and years and years. And then we were hit with something different. Correct.
We had no reason to, and like I said, I have them here. I have the essay on this. We had no reason to believe that our maximum cost allowance would change from $210 million to where it's at the 95 that it's changed to. And again, I mean, the project was presented. There was work being done on our maximum cost allowance. Yet still in January of this year, we received an SA-130. We have an SA-130 from the State Education Department with a maximum cost allowance at Kingston High School, main building only, at $70 million. Only $25 million less than what they're saying the whole campus gets now.
So I don't understand then how we have no recourse. I don't understand how we don't get our lawyers to go back to them and say, okay, I understand that this is what you think, but we were given different information and this isn't how it works.
The Every project is different. When they looked at the overall scope of our project, the buildings being knocked down, those kind of things, they reestablished what our maximum cost allowance is. And quite honestly, there looks to be that there was an error in the calculation to start with, the historical error, where multiple buildings were given the same maximum cost allowance as Maine, which made our maximum cost allowance look much larger. But again, we've been operating on that since the beginning, since forever, as our maximum cost allowance. So those are the numbers that we had when we went forward with the project as far as
those were apparently similar to the numbers that they had, if that's
those
what
are the
they
numbers
wrote
they
in
have.
January. So then I don't understand how there's no recourse for us.
I don't know. I don't think there's recourse. I think there is only what there is, and facilities planning it's within their authority to look at each project and determine the aidability and the maximum cost allowance. That's where we are.
It's disappointing.
Mr. Shaw.
Is this maximum cost allowance, is it, my understanding of the way that, is that it is a maximum amount that could be spent in any 5-year period. Is that what impacted us, or is it the overall cost for the project?
No, the overall cost for the project, the state ed isn't concerned about the overall cost of our project. They just determine what the aidability is on the plans they have in front of them. The maximum cost allowance is the maximum cost that can be spent now. The way it's interpreted is the maximum amount that can be spent in these 5 years. And again, these are separated out into several different buckets, whether it be renovations or new construction. So it's more complicated than that. But the short version is, we have X amount of dollars per building that we can spend within a 5-year period.
Mrs. Collins?
I would just, I know it's very disappointing to us all. I would agree with what Dr. Jablobowitz says. So just to reiterate, I would think in most cases there's no even appeals process, nothing that we could just...
No, that's what the last, 6 months or so has been, that whole appeal, working through what our project looks like, what we feel is aidable, what they feel is not aidable. And again, I think when we found this out in February, and then officially in March, we kind of felt like, okay, the negotiations seem to be over, and it's time for us to move forward and structure our plan so we can achieve what we want to achieve.
Anybody else? Dr. Jacobo?
So I had brought this up at a meeting several months ago, actually, about an owner's rep for us. And I think given the circumstances and given how complicated it is, and given that we're going to be dealing with change order after change order, probably hundreds of them, I think it's even more important that we have an owner's rep who's looking out for us and has only our interests at heart. And so I would advocate very strongly for that, and would ask that there be an RFP issued soon so that we can get someone like that on board.
Is that a motion, or is that,
Do I have to?
I don't know, is that something that we can, this is just, that's not on the agenda for new business, but I think that we should bring that up at the next meeting.
Yes.
My understanding is the BBL would be acting in our interest and nobody else's interest.
Absolutely. So this is actually, we can have the
We'll talk about it
discussion because we
another
want to talk about the budget.
But I know that it is, there have been inquiries in the past about having an owner's rep as separate from the construction manager. Well, I was involved in it.
And was there?
Well, there was actually.
A clerk of the works then?
Pardon me?
Was there a clerk of the works
Actually,
then?
Mr. McCoy brought it to our attention 4 or 5 years ago.
No, but was there for the project you're referring to?
No, it was for the high school project when we were considering it.
Okay. All right, well, putting that up on the agenda for the 22nd. Okay, and now we'll return to one else has any questions from the board members, to that portion of the meeting where we welcome public participation. Anyone who would like to speak, please speak clearly into the microphone, because we may hear you in the room, but they may not hear you on the live streaming at home. You're limited to 2 minutes. It's not a conversation. We ask people to be courteous at all times, and Ms. DePerna will let you know when you're approaching your 2 minutes. She'll give you a 30-second warning. So, is there anyone who would care to speak to the board at this point?
For the record, my name is Charlie Manning, and I live at 21 Allowance Street in the city of Kingston. And I'm here to speak about the Kingston High School renovation project. The Kingston City School District Board of Education presented the renovation project to the public vote on June 2013. Residents were told the project would yield and voted on 420,000 square feet of new and renovated space. The revised schedule announced last month calls for 360,000 square feet, with completion dates of 2018 and 2023. At the same price, $137.5 million, that's 60,000 square feet less for the same price that was voted on. So from June 2013, when it was presented to the voters, to February 2015, which Superintendent Padalino says was his wake-up call date, is 20 months. The credibility gap between the Kingston City School District administration and the taxpayers is widening. And in the absence of trust, I am calling for a revote of the project and a review of the board and administrative leadership. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Powers?
My name is Maureen Bowers, and I also wanted to speak about the high school, but in a different vein, and that is about the 100th anniversary, which we will be celebrating. Maybe Mrs. Scheer was going to mention this later, so I'm not wanting to steal your thunder, Nora, but a week from this weekend, this coming weekend, we'll be celebrating with a lot of different activities that have been planned over a long period of time by alumni and community members, and a lot of students put a lot of work into that project, which, as a member of the committee, was really, really great to see their involvement and their enthusiasm going back. And I did a lot of the yearbooks with them, and just the hoot they got out of looking at how some of us looked that many years ago. So that was fun to see and witness too. But I hope that all of you and the public will participate in the activities and get the word out on the weekend that's planned. And I think that it will be a lot of fun. I think it will be very interesting. And I think the end result will be a permanent memorial to Kingston High School as we move into the 21st century. And I know that the high school, having been on the board for a long time and been a part of the White Bat debacle, there were some curses, but I do believe that we're on the right road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Powers. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board at this time? Anybody? Okay. Hearing no takers. We'll move along to the superintendent's reports, and our major concentration, of course, is going to be the budget, but Dr. Panalino has a couple other items. So.
Two other items prior to our budget conversation. First of all, again, Mrs. Bowers kind of stole my first bit of thunder, but the April 18th is the 100th anniversary. 100th anniversary celebration starting at 8:45 with continental breakfast at Kingston High School.
8:30. There's a complete schedule of events online.
Online and
KHS 100 on the homepage.
The program.
Well, this is actually a memory book that was put together that will be given to each one of the graduates this year, but it's also available for the public, and it's wonderful. It's the history of 100 years. It's got all the valedictorians, salutatorians, May Queens, class officers for 100 years, and some wonderful memories and photographs, historical photographs. So, and I would be remiss if I did not thank Bob Johnson from Ulster Community College, who did all this typesetting, and Janet Mean, who ran it off in district. That's the 75th.
And we have the 75th. A lot of events that day, so we thank the 100th Anniversary Committee for all the work that they've done, the volunteer work, and they are a hardworking and passionate group of people about this project. Second thing is I sent out to the board a new copy of the school district calendar. We had a lot of conversation about the calendar after we put up the draft, and I think it's a good thing because that's the reason we put the draft up, is so we can have this conversation. One of the biggest concerns of the board and the members of our community was the start date before Labor Day. We went back, reworked it, spent some time working with our teachers union around the work day and work year, and we are able to make a change to this calendar that will allow for students to start on September 8th, which is the day after Labor Day. This contract still will allow us to have reach the 180 days of attendance that we need. We will have 187 student days, which allows us to reduce 7 snow days, 3 superintendent's conference days, which bring us to 177 actual student attendance days, but 188able days, and still gives us the 7 snow days that we never have to use.
That we never have to use.
So, well, I mean, if you read your letter that was just given to you, I control the weather, so I'm in charge of snow days as well.
You want to entertain that?
I would like, and any discussion, if I could answer any questions about this, and I would recommend the board adopt this as the official calendar for 2015-16.
I think in light of the number of letters we received from people in the community who were concerned because they'd already arranged for their summer vacations, this is a response to them, a thoughtful response, and it puts the start of school back to after Labor Day. So, are there any questions about that?
I just want to thank whoever came up with it, because it seemed like we were in an untenable situation when we discussed it the first time with all the regions being early and Labor Day being early, so I would agree, and just want to thank whoever did come up with it.
Yes.
How many teacher days are in the calendar?
Yeah, there are 191 teacher days minus the 7 snow days, and contractually the teachers work 184 days. So it's 184 teacher days.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Reverend Costin.
Yeah, I think it's a good schedule. I just, from my own understanding, when will school actually officially start?
The students' first day?
Well, know that, but there were 2 days the previous week. I saw.
Right, there are 2 days on the 2nd and 3rd of September, which will be, those will be superintendent's conference days, professional development days. The teachers will be here, school will be open, there'll just be no students.
Okay.
And there will be no school on the 4th and the 7th, so we still have that extended Labor Day weekend, and then the students will come in on the 8th.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Well, I would have to ask the board's permission to suspend the agenda again if we were going to vote on this tonight, or we'll have to...
It's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right,
So
yes.
It's not in the order.
It's on the
Well,
consent
this is,
agenda.
having the teachers come in before Labor Day for 2 days is not new.
No.
No.
But it's not new, but each time we do it, I have to have a conversation with the union to do that, because the teacher's contract does state Labor Day as the first day of teacher work.
So one thing that I like about this calendar a lot is that there's more continuity of instruction in this calendar, in the sense that, like, this past year we've had a lot of superintendent's conference days.
Yeah.
We're headed to another one we just had spring break, and it's felt very whiplashy, and I knew it would actually even after we approved it last year. So this has less of that. I know that there's a trade-off because it means then there isn't continual professional development throughout the year. So, but I think for kids, it's a nice continuity. I'm sorry we only have 177 student days, but I also see that we got squeezed. So I think this is a better solution.
Anybody else? Okay.
Well, again, that's on, we never have 180 days of student days. I mean, if you have to count conference days to get to 180, right?
Well, but you could have 180 days and just count conference days differently.
We could have 184 student days. Teacher, we have 184 teacher work days. We could have no superintendent's conference days during the year, and we could have 183. I'm sorry, because the one day in the teacher's contract is a day that they come in during the summer. Buildings are open, and it's a day of choice the week before school starts. So there's we could have technically speaking, we could have 183 student days if we eliminated all. Superintendent's conference days.
Right, or you could have 180 student days and 3 teacher conference days.
As long as we get to the 180,
Right.
We can't exceed 183
Right.
for the teachers. That's the key.
Right.
Are all of those aidable? If you went over?
No, just we were only aided for 180 days.
Okay.
But that doesn't,
But
that's not
Yeah,
outside
it
of
doesn't
that.
mean we couldn't have it. Okay, any other questions? All right, no. The main event, the budget.
Okay. As you all know, the budget was settled last week. Unfortunately, we were on break, which is, something we didn't think about when we scheduled that the budget would come out during that time, and we'd have a little delay in our conversation. But I have sent out to the board a new tax levy impact page as well as 3 possible scenarios. We did receive significant increase in our aid from the state education department. We saw about 82% of our gap elimination adjustment restored, as well as a 1.02% increase in our foundation aid, which ended up with about an 8.6 total % increase in our state aid. As those of you who attended the budget forums, you probably remember we were looking at approximately a $2 million gap. When we have a $4 million increase, we're looking at about a $2 million. We are now $2 million under cap as far as where we would be if you want to look at it from that perspective. We've been looking at it as with the tax levy limit, where would we be? So with the tax levy limit, right now we would be at a positive $1.2 million, as you can see. I do want to, for the board and for the public, we do have a version of the budget scenarios that I presented to the board, projected up on the screen. Well, it's not the screen; it's actually on the wall. But those are abbreviated of what the board has. The board has not only from top to bottom, left to right; those are the same. But the board also has the projections of the impact moving this budget into 16-17, 17-18. So you have a 3-year rollover kind of look. And just to kind of summarize each of them, your first on the left for the public and on the top for the board shows the increase in aid with a tax levy limit of 2.5. So if the Board of Education, if we adopted a budget with a tax levy limit of 2.5, and a appropriated fund balance of $1 million, which is what we had presented during the forums, we would have a total surplus of $1.9 million. Going next on, from left to right for the community and for up to second from the top for the board, we've just presented another scenario where the state aid would be the 8.6, and our tax levy would be 1.25. With a smaller appropriation of fund balance of about $300,000, bringing our budget to balance at 0. The last scenario that you see, farthest on the right for the community, bottom page for the board, is the total, is again, our state aid with a tax levy of 0. An appropriated fund balance of $1.5 million, and again, that would bring us to a surplus deficit of 0, or a balanced budget. The board can, we can, these, again, I kind of gave you a range. This is not a prescription. This is just a range through the board of ideas of where we are. I mean, we can do anything in between, obviously. The big choices, the discussion really tonight is, our choices are increase appropriations, decrease tax levy, or any combination thereof the two.
Can you just, we also have scenarios that, as you talked about, the rollout of what the, can you just talk briefly so that everybody can understand kind of what the impact is of each of these scenarios going forward? Because if we, there are pretty big impacts on what you do with your levy this year for following years and what you're able to levy in following years.
Correct. The going right to left for the board, or left to right for the board, you can see, I mean, there's clearly, obviously, I mean, you don't even have to look at this, you can talk through this. If you have a 0 tax levy limit 1 year, your tax levy calculation for the next year is based on your levy for the prior year. So if you have a 1% increase in your tax levy, obviously the next year's calculation for the tax levy and for your tax levy will be higher. If you keep it at 0, and you can see if you look at the deficits when you look at the out years, when you look at the 2.5, your deficits are, you stay at a positive in the 16-17, you go to about $1 million negative in the 17-18, and again, that's all about tax levy, ability to increase the tax levy and collect more taxes, increase revenue. And all of these, you can see, I mean, there's a lot of numbers on here, are based on, a lot of assumptions. I mean, we have a lot of assumptions. One of the difficult parts about this year's budget, and even having this conversation, even now, even after we know the numbers, we've been under the, working around having 0. We've been working around not spending a lot of time talking about what can we do. We don't even have a philosophy really around the budget because we're so much in the dark. But you see, I mean, as the tax levy increases this year or decreases, you see that has that impact, rolling out on tax levies in the future. And the deficit, you look at a 0, for example, we go to a 0, we appropriate fund balance, and then we have, looking out in the out years, an estimated $1.3 million deficit would be next year, and 3.5 the year after. Again, those, there's a compounding effect. We don't predict the future. I mean, if you had asked me last year, we would get 8.6% increase in state aid this year, I would have said no, we wouldn't.
Mr. Shaughnessy.
Well, a couple comments. Well, first of all, clarification. At the top of the page, it's not on there. Oh, I see. SA stands for state aid.
State aid.
Okay. That answers that. But if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember the board having any real discussions about what we would do with extra money this year. Is that right? So, if we were to say we're going to keep the 2.52% levy and take all the extra state aid, how would we spend up 1.9? We have to have a balanced budget. So if we're going to keep all that revenue, we have to spend it. We have to plan to spend it. So how would we do that? We haven't had any discussion about it.
Yeah, that's what we're
We had a
tonight.
discussion,
But we've been told all along that the budget preserves programs.
Right.
So what do we, if it already was preserving all of the programs, then what new programs are we going to add? We haven't had any discussion about that.
Well, it preserves all the programs at the current levels. I mean, there are programs that exist in the district that might be enhanced if,
I think that we've been discussing this administratively, since informally since the Thursday or Friday last week, and then more formally this morning with our assistant superintendents. And our feeling, especially given the year that we had, our feeling is we have a number of initiatives in place, many initiatives in place. Initiatives that started 2 years ago as part of the restructuring and the closing of schools and those kind of things. And there are areas of that restructuring and those initiatives that we would like to shore up. You know, we've had a couple of years of seeing where we are, where are the areas where we think maybe we could make some changes. I do believe that there are, given now, we have a couple of weeks before the board has to adopt the spending plan. There is some more work we need to do to look and see. I'm not one to spend just because it's there. I think we still need to look at what our efficiencies could be around shoring up those programs, and I'm still waiting for some answers on a few things there. I think Mr. Shaughnessy's point is pretty well taken. We have worked towards maintaining the programs that we had based on the idea that we would receive little or no increase in state aid. Could we maintain where we are and move forward? Obviously, you see with a zero tax levy, I'd say yes, we can. We would be increasing the conversation the board could talk about if that was the direction we wanted to go, would be the appropriated fund balance, which would be $1.5 million. That is the investment there. And then if you look in the out years where we would be, but for 15, 16, could we achieve the things that we had planned to achieve, maintain the programs that we have for our students for this year at a zero tax levy limit, I would say, or zero tax levy, I would say yes. Are there areas where we could make some improvements and shore up some of our current initiatives that would require to go into that tax levy, or go into that surplus of state aid? I would say yes to that as well. I think the schizophrenia around this year's budget has really put us in a place where we were working towards the idea that we would have nothing, and working towards making sure we can maintain everything that our students have with nothing. So to say that we can do that, we can.
Reverend Childs.
I think it's a wonderful position to be in, that we've got more money than what we plan to have. One of the concerns that I have, and I would like us to consider, when we close the schools, one of the things that we said, we had a lot of support people who were traveling from different schools in the section, and we were going to have more support people dedicated to the building. That didn't work out totally the way that I thought it was going to work out. And I would like to see some support people dedicated to the building, because I think it really will impact what the children are able to do. We got classes with a lot of special ed that's integrated, and I think that's the way it ought to be. But I think that we need more people in the building to make it more effective. And if we got money, I'd like to see some consideration of doing that type of thing. We cut out librarians. There's all across the board, and we had to do it. It was the right thing to do. But if we can restore some of this in the building so that it can impact the children and enhance their learning, I think we should consider doing that.
And that was one of the things we discussed briefly this morning. And one of our issues around that is, in our bigger schools, in our larger schools that were impacted most by the restructuring, we do have more of the people that, if you have a music teacher in this building, and that's that building's music teacher. What we ran into, and even really didn't even foresee when we closed the building, some of these changes, we don't have enough programming to schedule a full-time music. Let's say if we were in Meyer, and there's not enough programming in the day for us to contractually fill a music teacher's whole schedule. So and then we need to use the other time of the day for ELL, math, and other mandatory classes. So it's nice, it's not like in high school where we'd say, okay, well, we have these extra 3 periods for this teacher. We can give more electives and schedule around that. We don't have the time in the day, and we don't have the programming for that individual. So our choices would be, put them to do something that they're not certified in. Well, we're only allowed to do that for a certain period of time during the day. So we would still end up with, the way we started the scheduling, in those cases, we have teachers who would end up with 50% or less of their contractual obligation for assignments to be assigned. But when you share them, you get a full-time person in those two positions. So we tried to eliminate that as best we could in the specials area, but there are some places where we were, if I put a math teacher, or not math teacher, a music teacher, say full-time in Meyer, half of the day, every day, that music teacher will have nothing to do.
Ms. Guido?
In line with what Reverend Child said, there was a lot of discussion at the beginning of the school year about large class sizes. So, for me, I'd like to advocate for if we did have any surplus to be able to offer students either more teaching assistants. I know it was a struggle to do that, or I know it's hard to create sections where we don't have rooms or space for it, but I think that would be, I believe that there's a half median between 0% or $0 increase and $2 million increase in the percentages, but I think it would be nice to be able to offer some more quality instruction, especially at the elementary school level, especially with all the changes that are going on in the curriculum.
Between September and now, we've spent a lot of time. We look every week at our census. Ms. Contratti sends it to us every weekend, and every Monday morning, Mr. Verge and Mr. Olson and I, we review our enrollment in each class, in each building, at each grade level. And so we've had a lot of discussion about that. And I think some of the things that we put into place last year, that we put into place a little bit later than we would have liked to, we're now in a better spot looking at those things. And I think that we can address much of the imbalance that we saw last year within our spending plan that we've already proposed for this year.
So you mean even with special permissions and the imbalances in...
We made some changes in the special permissions policy, the regulations in the policy, which we've worked with the policy committee to do, which will help us in that area as well. So that was one of the special permissions was one of the issues, and as well as looking at, we think where we're looking at bulges, and again, we looked at the beds data so that we could see where we are with some things. We feel that we can address it within the current budget with teachers and new sections. Especially, our real focus, was on the K through 1. It was that K through 1 issue that we were really concerned about.
Just one more follow-up question. And what kind of target per class, per pupil sections are we looking at?
I don't. Obviously, we really like to see that K1, to be in that 20 range. That's really where I'd like to see. Now, I say that, and now Mr. Kimball prints that, and now someone comes back and says that's what anything that's 21 is above what we can do. There are going to be, unless we redistrict everything, every building, every year, we're going to have those changes. We're going to have a 22. We're going to have, it's going to happen. What we're really looking at is to not have these 26s and 27s, and we think the spending plan that we've been talking about throughout the last few months is we can make the arrangements within that spending to keep that from happening.
So, Mike, I had two follow-up comments, one from what Reverend Todd said and one from what Ms. Guido said. First, I would hope it's K2. We've always talked about K2. I don't know where we've lost the 2 somewhere along the lines around keeping.
It wasn't the issue, because 2 wasn't really the issue last year. K1 was our focus.
There are some larger. Okay, that may be. However, going forward, I would hope that it's really K2 that we're talking about with keeping the numbers in containing numbers, and whether that is having additional TAs, which I think has worked in some places, or splitting the classes, which I think has worked in other places. I think that's great. I was reading through the plans that were given to us a few weeks ago, and one of the things that one of the schools was cited for doing well, actually, was focusing resources at the K2 level. And that's a direct outcome of those early conversations where we gave those schools, or said to those schools, we do have kind of big classes in these, and let's add some personnel. So that was heartening to see, actually. So I'm glad to hear you say that we can continue that.
I was just going to say, and in addressing that, while we really would like to be as consistent as possible district-wide, but we also want to give limited autonomy out there to our buildings to do things. So, like we said in September, my first call when we see this is to the principal to say, because the principals know their players, and they know what will work best. In one building, a 26-student kindergarten, that teacher will work better with having a teacher's assistant. In the other building, they're going to say, no, we need to open a section and spread these three, make these 2 sections 3 sections or whatever. And so there will be different decisions made in every building. So people, some might come forward and say, well, I've heard there's 26 at Graves, and the answer would be, well, there's 26 at Graves because there's a teacher's assistant, and that's the principal worked with the teacher, said this is, and sometimes it's just like different solutions work for the same problem in different places.
Right, that's fine. The net effect was that there were more, the ratio was lowered, and those kids, and that's right, and that was a local decision, and that's fine, as long as that decision was, those were class-sized TAs. Those were not about special ed or TAs at large, or those were to reduce the ratio in those grades. So however we decide that works, I'm glad to hear that we can continue that practice. But then following up on what Reverend Child said about specials teachers and when we close schools and having dedicated special teachers, that also was my understanding at that time. I hear what you're saying and I understand how it doesn't work like that with program. But one thing that we did talk about was dedicated social workers in each school. I'm not sure that we have that. Do we? Right. So that is actually different from a program, like a teacher, a program, special program teacher, a social worker, I'm sure, could fill in a day. And so I would like to see that kind of support in our schools also. It was something that we had talked about when we did the transition.
Mr. Michael.
Yeah, I must agree with my fellow colleagues about investing more money for our students. But I was very concerned about the last time we had the finance committee meeting, I believe. Mr. Olson, I've been seeing a lot of increases of reassessment of our big real estate holders in the district. And it's a fight every day, try to keep the assessments. So I would like to see some of the money, if we have some extra money to keep building up the certiorari fund. Because I know property values are coming down, and the big companies, I said, they're fighting every day the reassessment. So I would like to see some of this money, if we are going to go through this plan, to keep building up the fund. Right, Mr. Olson? I mean, correct me if I was wrong.
No, Mr. Michael, you're not wrong. We have had tax certiorari challenges constantly, and we heard about one, I think, at the last executive session last time we met.
Right,
so
okay.
They're not going to stop, I don't think.
I know.
Mr. Olson, just quickly, just so the board knows, our tax certiorari reserve is funded at what % of our exposure right now? Do you know that? I mean, what's?
I'm sort of thinking it's about a half.
What do our auditors recommend?
Yeah.
What do our auditors give us a recommendation on what we should have in the tax certiorari fund?
Well, the auditors at this point have approved kind of where we are.
Okay.
So I don't know that they'd want us to go particularly higher as a percentage, but they seem to be comfortable, as we're fairly comfortable with where we are right now.
Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Collins.
I'll piggyback on some of the things that were already said, and then maybe just one request. And as Reverend Childs put it, or someone said, it's kind of schizophrenic. I think maybe Dr. Catalina said that. I see it as happy trouble. And it seems like we could be in a position to either maintain status quo or perhaps improve a little bit. I know we're all aware of this, but I think it needs to be said. We do have that large project out there looming, so I think that fiscal responsibility, raising taxes is always a concern. And I would love to see some more consistency, as you were saying, in terms of staffing, in terms of class sizes, even if you look at some of the supplies. And I realize a science class, high school science is going to have a request for more supplies than, let's say, an elementary school class. But if there's anything that we could give to just improve the quality of life, even just a small percentage of this windfall for our students and teachers, I think it's well worth it. And that being said, I think that what you're doing, Dr. Catalino, in your cabinet, that's important. We need to hear where you think this should go, and then give us some time, because this is new to us all, but it is happy trouble, as I see it.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Shaughnessy, and then I'd like to say something.
Well, a couple of things. In terms of the fund balance and the tax certiorari, last year, at the end of the year, and I guess it was in July or August, we had over $6 million in fund balance from the prior year, and we put $1.5 million into the appropriations fund, the general appropriations fund, and we put $250,000 into the unemployment insurance reserve, and we put $1.8 million into the tax certiorari fund, and we put $2.5 million into the employee retirement contribution fund. So this $1 million is not, I mean, if we wanted to, we could play with a lot more than $1 million into the, in out years, because when we have our auditor's presentation, he always praises us for having a ratio of expenses to budget of 95 to 97 percent or something like that. So there's always a couple percentage points of the budget that's left over at the end of the year, and as the budget gets larger, there's more dollars in that couple percent. And one thing I'm not quite, I don't object to that necessarily, but for instance, I don't know though what do we do with the money that's in those reserves? I know what we do with tax certiorari. We have to have that money in case there are adverse settlements against us in tax claims. But the Employee Retirement System Reserve Fund right now is $5.4 million. So if we had to, we could take money out of that and apply it to next year's employment retirement contribution to the employee retirement system. Is that one of the things that we could do?
Yes.
So there's just a lot of there's a lot of options except beyond $1 million. And then the other thing is the column on the left for viewers and the first page for board members, the $1.9 million if we maintain our maximum tax levy. I mean, that's the maximum amount of money we could spend because we have the state aid increase and the tax levy, and that's as far as we can go in terms of revenue. But if we were to take $1.9 million and put it up into the appropriations section, let's, just let me use a round number of $2 million. We have about $85 million in instruction in that column in 2015, 2016. So if we took $2 million, if we increased that by $2 million, so we had zero, then that would be a built-in cost, and it would carry over to the next year as well with an increase. Is that right, or is that wrong? So that we would have $89 million in the 2016, 2017 column, and that would put us in a deficit of $800,000 for that year, and we would have another $2 million. We'd have $91 million in 2017, 2018, and that would come out. That would reduce the $980,000 deficit to a $2.9 million deficit. Mm-hmm. So it's so when you change one thing in these formulas, it changes everything else. So I just think we need to keep that in mind.
We do. I had thought while we were discussing priorities, I went actually through the second budget forum list of priorities that the public had, and a lot of the things I had there, the K2 class size, art for every grade in middle school, because that's been a bone of contention there. But what we got all the reports from CASTA that were done with the evaluations done in the school. And I know we're going to discuss them at the next meeting, but in reading through them, there are next steps in all of those. And I really agree with Mrs. Collins and with, what some of the other board members have reiterated. We'd like to hear what you think that should be focused on, because we are a focus district. We do have a disparity between the graduation rate of our minority students. I know that it's closing. It's not there yet. And we still don't have the same access to AP courses, et cetera. So it's something we need to begin to look at long before the kids get to high school. I, too, would like to see some of those resources, the instructional literacy coaches at all levels, but also to hear what you think the next step is, and not right this minute, but have you actually articulate that for the board so that we know what it is you see as needing attention in the immediate future because of the information that you've gained from having the evaluations done.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
I have some line item questions about the budget. Are we moving on to that or no?
Sure.
I guess I was just looking mainly for the increases and decreases and seeing where there were changes. I had one question about the Institute for Urban Family Health increasing from $55,000 to $175,000 spent next year. Can you speak to what it is that is causing that increase? What services we're receiving, or?
Yeah, that's a change from offering it just in one location to offering it at two. We've moved to Miller as well, so we have them working at GW as well as at Miller. And I mean, is there anything else in that line other than that expansion? Yeah.
So it's my understanding that for students to receive services, they still have to have their own insurance. They're just using our building space, correct? For the services? We're not using those workers for direct support within the school. They're just increasing access to mental health by being in the building.
No, we use them for direct support within the school as well.
Okay.
They do both. They work as direct support in the building, but they also work with our students' families outside of the regular school day or outside of the building, in their own offices, in homes, and those kind of things. So it's kind of a 360 approach, but during the school day when they're with us, they do provide services to our students.
Even for students that are not their clients?
Even for students who are not their clients.
Okay. That was a misunderstanding, my bad. And I asked a few questions about, which I know aren't going to be very popular questions. On page 30 and 31, there were some really big increases in special ed administration salaries. Just wondering if there's been creation of, the assistant superintendent went from $27,000 to $120,000.
Because the assistant superintendent for special, that position didn't exist.
Yes. Okay.
Prior to this. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that position was the assistant superintendent for student services, and so that salary was taken out of several different lines.
Okay.
And now that's just taken out of one line. The 27 was the portion that was taken out of special ed, but now the entire piece is in that special ed. So your increase there is a reduction in other areas in the budget.
Okay. I have other things, but I'll let you ask questions when those are about special ed.
Okay. Dr. Jacobowitz.
I see that we have for instructional coaches, when you're looking over time, there's an increase each year, which makes sense because, again, we started from nothing. Mm-hmm. So I see for next year, it's an increase over this past year of about $70,000. So are we done with instructional? Is this it? We have our instructional coaches. We're going to hire more of them?
We are not planning to hire more instructional coaches next year.
Mm-hmm.
That's not in the plan. We are, again, looking at, we're in year 2 of implementing a pretty wide-ranging reform, for lack of a better word. I hate to use that's a dirty word now after our governor, but change. Yeah. And there's a certain amount of time we have to take to evaluate what we're doing. So we won't be increasing. And I've told the assistant superintendents, the deputy superintendents, I need the year-to-year feedback on what is the impact this is having. So we're making a pretty large investment, and so if we're going to either decrease or eliminate the investment, or we're going to increase the investment, or we're going to maintain it. So we're still evaluating that. And again, that's a 3-year process.
Mm-hmm. No, I just wanted to know okay, that's good. I hear great things about the instructional coaches, and that, in my mind, is part of the support that I hope we'll continue to be able to provide and maybe even enhance in future years. I would hope that part of that conversation about their effectiveness and how they're working is you remember we had the conversation about whether there'd be an instructional coach in a school or whether they'd be by grade, and they're by grade level, right? So they go around to each of the schools, and I hope that the conversation about effectiveness also involves efficiency, I'm sure it will, and how that is working.
Okay, anybody else? Ms. Guido, and then Dr. Jacobowitz again.
We had an increase in revenue from the BOCES rental properties from us. Is that from increased by, I think, over $100,000? Is that from the Carnegie rental?
Yes.
I just wanted to point that out, that it's something positive, not just, the negative changes that we're using a space. I saw they put up a new sign in front. I don't know how new that is, but I just noticed it today. But it's nice that we're getting money in for a program like that.
Thank you. Dr. Jacobowitz.
So under, on page 16, and this isn't really a change, it's just a question, we have gifted and talented, and I'm wondering if this is the CALC budget.
I'm not this.
It's
Page 16.
$30,000 for teachers, program planning.
Yes.
But this is CALC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Defer.
Okay, so we're assuming kind of same level of effort for next year with
Yes.
CALC.
Anybody else? Have we a chance to jump in here? Not today. Never mind the question from you. It's just trying to give them a chance.
There's a line item on a whole bunch of BOCES services that I guess are part of what we buy from them or purchase with them. There's e-learning, distance education. What is that?
I think it's a Castle Learning. It's our Castle Learning program that we use.
Castle Learning is a curriculum?
Castle Learning is just, yeah, it's a program where students work. Or it could be,
I mean, I know that they're...
I'll have to find out exactly what that
Okay,
is.
because I know that BOCES offers a lot of
Yeah.
distance learning AP classes and stuff like that. I'm just wondering what our rate of participation and things like that.
We have Castle Learning and also the support for the APEX.
For the what?
APEX learning, the credit recovery.
Okay.
So it could be either of those, that's what I'm not.
Okay. And a pretty big increase in regional test scoring.
Yes, we went from, we're outsourcing the regional test scoring. So we're no longer doing it ourselves, no longer doing, having teachers take the day off, a half day, have substitutes in the classroom. We're now working together as a consortium with all the BOCES. We are, having them tested, at BOCES, but by an outside company. And EVI is doing the test score.
So my understanding that May 7th was like the scoring day,
Correct.
but it's not.
No, now it will be a professional development day.
Okay, but it's common, all the school districts?
Everyone has it, yes.
Okay, because it's kind of a,
We made this decision when we, back in December, when it was brought to the BOCES, that we could all get in on this and get it done and not have substitutes throughout the district, during those few days. And it really, it's not, and we do the one day, but it's really not a one day,
No, I know.
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Mrs. Collins?
I have a quick one. I noticed that there's a line that's right on that second page, there's a number on it, 8999 for community service, and there's nothing in there. I was wondering what that is. Do you even know?
I don't know. I mean, there's nothing, obviously, there's nothing on that line. I mean, maybe a past line that's just left over in the line-by-line item rollover.
I'll tell you why I caught my eye wearing a policy hat. Talking about perhaps restorative justice or students being involved in community service. I don't know about if we still have participation of government, thinking about areas where we might put $250, $500, even minimally. So I'm just curious.
Thank you. Dr. Jacobowitz?
So I'm just giving you the page number just to make it easier. So page 32, we have the category limited English proficiency, and then the next category is summer school. But under limited English proficiency, it talks about instructional salaries. Instructional salaries 8, summer testing. And there's a pretty big increase, but I'm wondering what that is and how it then relates to summer school, or is that just pure testing of ELL? ELLs.
I'm sorry, Ms. Gibbons is looking at me like she wants to say something, so I'm going to...
No, not really. I don't have that page in front of me, so I can't really see what it is. But over the summer, we do have ELL teachers at the Title I summer school who provide services. Plus, we have all the screening that needs to be done for all the kindergartners, because we're not allowed to do that until the summer starts, for all the kindergartners and for all the new entrants. So,
But just for ELLs, or that's for everybody?
if it's under an ELL code, it's just for ELLs.
Right, it's under limited English proficiency.
Yeah.
That's quite a jump.
It's a lot, it's a lot.
Hold it, and Alan's going to...
Dr. Jacobowitz, were you referring to the top line in that
Yes.
area?
Yeah.
We've that represents the addition of an extra ESL teacher within the district for this coming year.
2 over prior year.
Okay.
We added that line number of personnel, and that line has increased.
Oh, so it's a slash.
So it's not just summer, it's...
There's a slash.
Oh, there's a slash.
I see it.
8 teachers and
8, and then summer testing, okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? No? Well, okay, yes.
Last September I think it was in September, the Kingston High School open house, I was in Mr. Lohman's choir class, and he said that next year, 15-16, he wanted to take his choir to a performance at Carnegie Center in New York City, and that he was hoping he could get new robes for his choir members. And I don't know if he made that request, or if it's too late to make that request, or... He told me then that it was about $15,000.
He would make that request through his department chair.
Yeah.
Right? And we haven't heard that request at this point.
It may be coming.
It is now.
Yeah.
Does he still have time to do it?
Yeah.
Well, when we have the new band uniforms, we ordered them in June, and we didn't have them for a full season, I believe. So it was close to 12 months prior. But the band uniform is a little more ornate involved than would be the robe. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
Mrs. Lau?
I see the safety prevention coordinator. Are we not having one next year?
We still have a safety.
But in the...
Yeah, it moved. Yeah, because it's no longer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's just under safety.
It's under safety.
When Mr. There was a point where the safety prevention, it was partially grant funded under those two types. That grant is no longer there, so we just have it under safety. The prevention pieces. Mr. Verge has taken over that piece.
Dr. Jacobowitz.
And then in district-operated transportation, I see there's a significant decrease, actually, in the software maintenance and support. I'm just wondering how we're performing that function and where the decrease is coming from.
Yeah, the salary line is up, offsetting that line to some degree. We have a person who's been a contractor for years who's leaving. What was that?
So the salary line goes up.
Okay.
So the salary line is up and offset that the line you're looking at is down.
Right. So right now there are two employees in that office. One is in the salary line. One would have been in that line. That one is retiring. We are adding that to the salary line and adding that position back to away from being a private contractor to being a district employee again. Currently posted.
Anybody else?
So where do we go from here? I mean, what is the administration's recommendation as to how we how we deal with the $1.9 million that we,
Well, I think we've met, we've looked at where the things that we wanted to shore up. I mean, outside of hearing some of the things that we've heard, some of them were the same. Obviously, some of them were the same. We really had limited idea of what the board's kind of feeling was. Again, I think there's a lot to be said for, and I think the board should seriously consider the reduction of the tax levy. There is, we worked for this. It wasn't necessarily this state aid windfall that brought this. This was 3 years of, tightening our belts, of becoming efficient, of right-sizing our district that put us in a position where we can now say we have, we're not looking at the fiscal cliff. We're looking actually away from the fiscal cliff, and I think it's important that in doing so, we look at the idea that we can reduce this tax levy limit, something we haven't really been able to do in the past. We've been going as close to the tax levy limit as we could, and trying to make sure that we don't overburden the taxpayers. But now we're in a position where maybe we can reduce that tax levy a little more than how we had in the past. So I think that there's much that we can do with the budget that we've put together. Would we, there's 4 people over right there who are shooting daggers at me right now because they have things that they want. But I think there is some responsible spending that we could do to shore up initiatives that we already have put in place that need to be tested out through time and seen if they work, and then make adjustments. And we can do that, I think, within where we are right now with the presentations I've made to this point. Are there some new things that came up tonight, and maybe some tweaking of that would cause some increase in spending of that 1.9? Yes, but I think again we should be very conscious of the fact that we got here through a process. That process involved our community, our taxpayers, and to reduce the tax levy is something that I think the board really should be considering, seriously considering.
Mr. Shaughnessy.
So if we looked at the center column, or the center row, and you show reducing the tax levy to 1.25, which is half of what the limit is, and then you reduce the appropriated fund balance to $300,000 from $1 million. I mean, we're still going to have fund balance at the end of this year. There's going to be millions of dollars to allocate to either the appropriations or to other funds. So we could maintain $1 million in the appropriated fund balance, and then that would give us, $700,000, or it could be or it could be $1.25 million in appropriated fund balance, and that would give $1 million in additional appropriations to allocate according to what you see. So that way we get the best of both worlds. We got an increase in appropriations in areas that we target as being beneficial to our students, and we reduce the tax levy for our taxpayers. We don't make it zero, but we cut it in half. And I think that would be an appropriate strategy to take.
I agree with that as well. Seems like many of our taxpayers came out and actually wrote to legislators too about the GEA, and I think it's appropriate that we share this happy news with them.
Just want to say too, with us, that we have to be elected to be a member of this district as well. Most of us, all of us are taxpayers, and most of us have children or grandchildren in the schools, so it is personal, and I think we take that as such. But I just want to say that I think your remarks are right on the money, Dr. Paolino, and I would agree with Jim. I think compromise, happy medium. If we can establish that, would be good.
And I think it's important also to point out that, we will, again, be under the tax levy limit, significantly under in that situation, and we will be tax freeze compliant. We're putting together our plan, and we're confident we'll be tax freeze compliant. So, there will be, a good portion of our community won't see any increase, even if the increase exists. So, we work toward that as well.
Did you still have a thought to share?
No.
Okay. Thank you. And anybody else?
Oh, I did have a question, sorry.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thought, that's why you threw me off. And this is just I could have probably Googled and looked a little research myself, but there's a 36.4% increase in total debt service. Can you just describe to someone who's this what that means?
Yeah, I mean, that's the money we pay on our money that we borrowed. Really, it's building project money.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay.
That was it?
That was it, yeah.
Okay.
Just to confirm.
Right, so we're ready to move on to the
What do we have next?
consent agenda.
Oh, yeah. That's the end of my report. So.
That's the end of your report? Thank you. And so for the next meeting, can you give us some guidance as to where the district will go together?
Yes, I will, prior to the next meeting, I will communicate with the board. Again, I did meet with the assistant superintendent, so I have ideas there. I will incorporate some of the things we've heard here tonight with those, and I'll be communicating with the board prior to the next meeting, so that you have materials and things to discuss. And again, I know, and I'm available to call as well if you want to talk about it outside of that.
All right, we're moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any resolutions that any board member would like pulled from the consent agenda? Dr. Jacobowitz.
BOE 68 and 69.
Okay. Any others? Okay. Hearing no others, I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda minus BOE 68 and 69.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of accepting the consent agenda minus BOE 68 and 69, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. All right, now BOE 68. Entertain a motion to accept BOE 68. BOE 68? Hold it, yeah, so we can have a conversation, but we have to have a motion. Okay? All right, discussion.
I just wanted to point out that we're merging the girls' swim team with Rondout. This is an extension of what we've done this past year, correct? So, and how has it worked out?
All of our mergers have been we've had some mergers where we merge and then we don't end up with the numbers that we thought we were from the other schools, but there's been no issues as far as the students who have participated in the cooperation between our athletic director and the other athletic directors. It's part, like I say the same thing every time. It's part of what we're doing now. Right. I mean, to make sure we can offer, we're working together to merge things so kids can do things.
And no one's been displaced.
No one's been displaced. There's been none of our students have been cut due to it. I mean, remember last fall there was a big conversation about the football with Ontiara, and we ended up having one student really finish, go all the way through. So it's an opportunity for a few kids, or an opportunity for us to take two small teams and make one that maybe it wouldn't be run. The team wouldn't be run and make one larger team, kind of thing. So it's been very successful so far. In good cooperative effort.
Quick question. Did Rondout have a swim team before this?
Yes, I believe they did.
Where did they practice?
I don't know. They didn't have it. Okay, I'm sorry.
At the Y?
So the Rondout swim club, maybe. The swim club, and then, okay. This may be their first year competing in Section 9. I'm not sure.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of BOE 68, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, and moving on to BOE 69, merging the teams with the Mount Academy.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
So this is really the same issue, although I know that we had merged some teams with the Mount in previous, was it all of these teams? It was.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
so
Mount-
this is just a continuation of that
Right,
relationship.
and it's really, it stems back from when they attended our schools. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of BOE 69, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, that marks the end of the consent agenda, and again, we've reached a portion of the meeting where we welcome public participation. I know there's nobody signed up because we gathered the list, but if there's anyone who would like to address the board at this point, please speak directly into the microphone, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Jason Prizzi. I'm a taxpayer in the district. I'm also a teacher at Kingston High School, father of 3 Kingston City School children, and I'm very opposed to BOE 68 and 69. Reason is that the board is charged with doing what's best for Kingston City Schools, taxpayers, children. And I see this as diluting our resources to help other taxpayers from outside of our district. And I don't understand why we would do that. There's no benefit at all to our students or our taxpayers. In fact, the effects will be negative and are negative. One of those negatives is that what happens when a Kingston City Schools taxpayer child is cut and a Mount child is kept on that team. That's going to happen eventually. Is the board ready to talk to those parents and explain why that is? Also, even if no students are cut and you keep everyone, well, that means that my tax dollars to that coach is now going towards helping other kids from outside our district. Are we going to hire more coaches? Are we going to raise their coaches' salaries? I don't think so. I know that in the resolution it says that they will have, they'll pay any and all costs associated with that. Well, a lot of these costs are going to be soft, and they're not going to be able to be seen. Okay? I don't understand why we as a board would do this, especially in a time when taxes, all right, I know this budget, and I give you guys a lot of credit. This is awesome. All right? It really is, and it's been a long time in the process of getting this type of budget and these kind of numbers, but in the time where we pay a lot of taxes and taxpayers feel like we get less and less, I don't see why we would do this. So I would just prepare yourselves to talk to parents. And this is the first I heard. I just happened to go on the website tonight, and I thought maybe why wouldn't we have this up for public comment and discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Percy. Does anybody want to respond to that? No? Okay.
We haven't had issues.
All right. Okay, anyone else who wishes to address the board at this point? Please step forward to the microphone. If not, I'll entertain.
Before we adjourn, can we just reiterate that in the consent agenda, we passed a calendar for next year which does not have students coming to school before Labor Day? In case anybody is listening who wasn't listening before.
First student day after Labor Day next year. Okay? Now we'll move on with, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Please go red. Have a good evening. Get home before this freezing rain.